Welcome to another interior real estate photography tutorial. Some of the most difficult situations you're going to come across are dark homes, dark wood homes, log homes. This one in particular posed a couple challenges. One, because I didn't have a ton of natural light coming into this house, and number two, the tungsten lights were on in this house. I'm going to show you how I dealt with it in this situation, and I'm also going to explain at the end of this video on ways that I could have made this look a lot better. So two things that I would have changed, but how I shot this was I was on my EM1 Mark II, which is a micro four thirds camera with the Leica 7.5mm. I was using the Godox AD600 with the mag sphere on top of that. And if you can see on my belt clip, normally I'm running with the Godox V1 with this diffuser, the MLCD15. Stay tuned for more reviews on how well this thing works. But for this particular real estate video, because I needed the power, I wanted the light, I was running with the Godox AD600. And you can even tell in this situation, I've tweaked this image a little bit, brought up the let me just copy and paste these so we can get right back to how it was, but let me reset this. I mean, look at how orange everything is. No matter what you're doing, you got these beams in the ceiling. I mean, you're not only fighting crazy shadows that aren't supposed to be there naturally, but you're fighting the color casts. I mean, this is like a cream color floor, and it just looks orange. And if we color correct it, now you just get blue everywhere. You could pull out the blues, and obviously I'm editing this just to show you how you could actually light over here to light like this area over here to get correct color, because you know, something like this is the image that we're going to be working with right here. This is what I recommend doing in a situation like this, and that is running 5 brackets at 2 stops apart. That's going to give you enough to play with. Is 3 going to be enough? Maybe. In most situations, yes, 3 brackets are going to be enough, but why not just shoot 5? If your camera will allow you to do 5 auto brackets, you know, I would say 1 to 2 stops apart, play around, practice, but I just do 2 stops apart when I do 5, so it just seems to work really good. So this is the images that my camera gave me with that auto exposure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then is this the flash? Yeah. Okay. So let me just show you real quick. And so what you want to do with every one of your images is make sure you have your profile corrections, because if I toggle this off, look at the vignetting, especially with this Leica 7.5. if you guys are using this lens on the micro four thirds system, straight out of camera, this is what you're going to get, the vignetting, when you bring these raw files into Lightroom. So you want to make sure you do the Venus optics with the Leica 15mm f2 model. The make is Venus optics, and that will give you that correction. And so that's what I did with all of these. This is the, you know, 3rd, 4th, and then the 5th final image. I'm actually going to bring this exposure back down just a little bit. But when we merge all these, this is the HDR image that we get. So what I want to do is get this as close to correct color as possible. And see, I just kind of picked that off the floor. It's not white floor. It probably should be. Well, it's a cream color floor, but that's how much color casts if we were to do as shot. You know, that's not horrible, but these tungsten lights aren't helping the situation either. So you can try finding something white, for example. Okay, so if there's nothing white in the scene, let's go we have to as shot. And when you do as shot, your camera should have been on auto white balance. And some of the newer cameras right now will do auto white balance for white. And so that gives you a little bit more accurate white balance. But a lot of times, like with that, even with, you know, autofocus, cameras aren't perfect. So I always try to come up here to auto. And see, that just made it way too much magenta in the image. And I go back to as shot without any white, you know, just start doing it manually. Start bringing that temperature down. until it, you know, because if you go all the way, look at how blue that is. Bring that back up. I'm going to say like 23 is doable for me. So what I'm doing right now is I'm tweaking my my ambient, my HDR image, and I'm gonna bring these highlights up, back up to there, because I want to get this as evenly as I possibly can for my ambient layer. And then we're gonna pop a flash right into the room. Now, notice that I got shadows here and here, and I'm gonna tell you how I would have fixed this at the end of this video. But we want to try to make this one look as close to this image as possible. So what I want to do is I want to actually highlight the flash layer and then click this right here, and we're going to take and drag our ambient layer into here. And so now we can play with the flash layer. And again, let's cool it down just a little bit. If we bring the flash layer down, we want to be careful though, because this one we want to make sure that our window view doesn't get too cold out there. See how that looks? Just doesn't look good at all when your window view doesn't match it doesn't have the correct white balance. It just looks pretty bad. So if we zoom back out, can we brighten this up just a little bit without losing our white balance? Even if we do the color check on the floor like we did, yeah, still just, if we toggle that on and off, yeah, I got an idea. So this is what we're gonna do. We are going to bring that white balance back up so the outside is nice and warm. And seeing as how we don't have really any blue in the sky, we're gonna be able to get away with this. This wouldn't work if we did, but what we can do is, well, we could do a mask and cover it up, but we're just gonna take the blues out of this image. The other thing we can do too is play around with, what is it, pulling out the orange and the yellows. We don't want to pull out too. What about magentas? Get rid of the magentas. Nope, that doesn't work. I don't know as if I'm liking this. Let's bring that blues back up. Bring the oranges back up. Maybe drop the yellows. See what, taking the yellows out of it. Looks pretty bad. We're just trying to match cabinetry color as close as we can. See, look at the difference between what flash does. And of course, when I pop that flash, we have unnatural shadows, and we actually get rid of the natural shadows. So when we blend these, so this is the flash, this is natural light, you can tell what the true color is on those cabinets, because this is critical. Something like this, you know, you're gonna want to be able to show, and this was close to $1 million home on a lake, so you want to make sure that you're getting, you know, as accurate as possible. So we got our colors pretty much as balanced as possible. All right, so let's highlight these. Let's get these into Photoshop to do our Flambient merge. All right, so once both layers have been loaded into Photoshop, in a typical Flambient situation, right, is putting your ambient layer on top and creating a layer mask, whether you want to invert it or not. And actually what we could do is Command I to invert that. And now what we do is paint back in the ambient light where we need it. And I'm making my brush bigger. Now normally, see, I'm only doing a 5% flow, so we are leaving some of the flash, you know, in there. And this is gonna help. Let's take that glare out of there. Help retain a lot of that color. Because I'll show you what happens if we end up doing luminosity mode. And see, this is why I like to have a nice even flash layer for this type of work, because usually the ambient light is horrible. Even with your nicely blended, you know, your 5 bracket HDR image, it still doesn't look good. it just washes out the color. You have, you know, flash is going to give you that true color, but you've got to make sure that you're not using your flash against yourself. So this is already looking 100 times better. So if we toggle that on, that's just flash. That's with the ambient light blended back in. Looks really good. So now what we can do is let's flatten this image. And there's a couple things you can do. Actually, you know what? I'm going to Command Z to undo that. This was our ambient layer. I'm just going to show you what luminosity mode would do. And we're getting some funky looking shadows. I don't know as if I like that a whole lot because of the shadow work. So if we go back to normal, for me, it's just too much magenta coming through with that, with the luminosity mode. I'm going to show you a better method for this situation. Leave me a comment below, guys, if you think I'm wrong in that situation. I'm here to learn too, but I'm here to also, you know, get people's wheels turning, and maybe you were doing it a different way, and this way looks like it's going to be a lot better. And I also just saw something that we could have white balanced off the kitchen sink here too, so always be looking for something white. If you really want something white, maybe just leave something white in the room, you know, do an ambient shot and then remove it, you know, so at least you could have the correct white balance. That's something that you could do in this situation. So what we're going to do is we're going to flatten this image, and we're going to Command J to duplicate the layer. We're going to come up here to image, or no, it's layer. Where is it? No. I'm sorry. We're going to come up here to image, adjustments, and then down here to match color. And then we're going to click on this neutralize, and now you can work the fade to see how I usually like to go right into the 50% and then hit OK. And the reason I like to duplicate the layer is because we can see the before and after. See how that toned it down? Toned down some of that orange look. So what I want to do is we're going to dump this. And let's Command J again to duplicate that layer. And we're going to come up here to filter. This is another way to do it. Blur and then average. So it's going to smear all the colors together, and this is what it is. It should be neutral gray. How we can get this to neutral gray is we're going to come down here and use a curves adjustment layer, because the middle eyedropper, if you hover over it, tells you to sample in an image to set gray point. So we're going to set the gray point right there, and then we can toggle that layer off, and then we toggle that on and off. It does almost the same thing, and again, we could drop the opacity, but that just tones down that color cast, as you can see, before and after, a lot better. I almost still think we have some blue in the image, and if you do think that, you could create another layer, a hue saturation layer, and just choose the blues and take that saturation down. Not all the way, but we could see, toggle that on and off, see if that does anything. It does around the stonework. Take it down a little bit more. But there you go. Let's flatten this, and let's bring it back into Lightroom for our final bump. Okay, this is our image back into Lightroom. Interior final bump. Basically what I'm doing for this is I'm bringing the highlights down. Sometimes I like to do that, sometimes I don't, but we're going to bring this down. Now, some things that I don't want to do is bring the clarity up on this, because if we bring the clarity all up, already up, way up, it almost starts to look like an HDR image, and it really isn't. It's really a Flambient. We just used HDR to get a more dynamic range starting point for our ambient, so I like that. Bring that back down. We could actually bring the contrast up a little more, give it some light. Now, if you notice, like in the back, maybe it's, you know, could use just a little bit more light compared to this side. You know what I like to do? Sometimes I like to come over here, take my brush tool, and what is the, let's see, and you can just start painting wherever you want that to be brighter. And then just take your exposure slider and just slide that up until it kind of matches the other side, like that. And if we, you know, toggle that on and off, look at the difference. It just made it look a little bit more lively there. So you could have done dodge and burn in Photoshop too. And I mean, there's it's the thing with Lightroom and Photoshop. There's a million different ways to do the same thing, what I've learned. So let's toggle that back off. I mean, you could spend a little bit of time tweaking this, but I mean, is the white balance perfect? No. Let's try to color correct off this white sink, see what happens. I mean, that's before, that's after. I don't know as if I really care for that as shot. Let's see what that looks like. I mean, you could still sort of play around with that white balance after the fact. But I think that's about as close as we're going to get. So, what I would have done differently. I would have still done my 5 bracket HDR, but I would have first shut these lights off. And here's why. They're really working against us. They weren't actually as bright as the window view, but if the realtor was okay with it, I would have shut the lights off. Secondly, I would have used an umbrella instead of the mag sphere. Let me show you. Instead of the mag sphere on my 8600, I just would have shot into the room with an umbrella, keeping the distance between the bulb of the flash and the actual umbrella as far apart as I could to soften that light. Is tons of light power. Probably would have shot into the room over here and maybe into the room in the center and then into the room over here in this angle. I probably would have even come into the room here and maybe did a crossfire over to this side and then come over to this side and shot this side. Maybe reversing it so I'm, shooting into the room with the back of the umbrella and then switching it over here. Or you could use a reflector. Here's the final image. Leave me a comment below if you have other methods and what you're using as a modifier for these dark rooms. But leave me a thumbs up if this video helped you, and hit that subscribe button. Tutorials are coming out all the time. Thanks for watching, guys.